The encounter. Jason Parker sat at the control panel of his aging mining vessel, the Emberhawk, staring out into the endless black void of space. The hum of the ship's engines was the only company he had, save for the occasional chirp of his outdated AI assistant, K4. Mining asteroids wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills. Barely. Just as Jason leaned back in his chair, ready to take a break from scanning asteroid belts, a deafening alarm blared through the cockpit. The screens around him flashed red, and K4's robotic voice echoed through the chamber. Unidentified object detected, Captain. Closing in at an alarming speed. Jason shot upright, eyes scanning the console. What do you mean closing in? We're in the middle of nowhere. Before K4 could answer, the vessel shuddered violently, as if gripped by an unseen force. Jason gripped the edge of his console, his heart pounding. Outside the cockpit window, space itself seemed to ripple and twist. Slowly, a sleek alien ship emerged from the dark, a silver construct that seemed to defy physics with its elegance. "What the hell is that?" Jason muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The alien ship hovered ominously, dwarfing the Emberhawk in size. Its surface shimmered like liquid metal, constantly shifting and reflecting the starlight. Jason's pulse quickened as a beam of golden light shot from the alien craft, enveloping his ship. "Captain, we are being boarded," K4 warned. "Boarded? By who?" Jason demanded, but before he could do anything, the golden light coalesced into a figure on the bridge. There she was, an alien woman unlike anything Jason had ever seen. She stood tall, her humanoid form draped in a flowing silver gown that seemed to merge with her glowing translucent skin. Her eyes were a deep, mesmerizing violet, and her hair shimmered like threads of starlight. Jason instinctively reached for the blaster holstered at his side, but the woman raised a hand, and his weapon was wrenched from his grasp, floating harmlessly to the floor. "Human," she said, her voice calm yet commanding, resonating with an almost musical quality. "I mean you no harm." Jason hesitated, his breath caught in his throat. Who are you? And what do you want with me?" The woman tilted her head, studying him as if he were a curious specimen. "I am Nivara, emissary of the Zelleran Collective. We have observed your species from afar, and now we have decided it is time to act." "Act?" Jason echoed, still unsure if this was a dream or a nightmare. "What kind of act involves boarding my ship without permission?" Nivara ignored his sarcasm, her gaze unwavering. "Your kind stands at a crossroads. The universe is vast, and many species have risen and fallen based on the choices they make. You, Jason Parker, have been selected to represent humanity." Jason blinked. "Me? Represent humanity? There's been some mistake. I'm just a miner, not some diplomat." Nivara stepped closer, and Jason instinctively backed against the console. Her presence was overwhelming, her aura radiating power and grace. "You may see yourself as insignificant, but your actions speak louder than you know. You have been chosen because of who you are, not what you do." Jason's mind raced. He had no idea what Nivara was talking about, but he didn't like where this was headed. Chosen for what, exactly? Nivara's expression softened slightly, though her tone remained firm. "To prove that humanity is capable of something my people value above all else. Love. True, selfless love." Jason let out a nervous laugh. "Love? I think you've got the wrong guy. And the wrong species, for that matter." Her violet eyes seemed to pierce through him, as if seeing into the depths of his soul. "This is no jest, Jason Parker. If you fail, the consequences will be dire, not just for you, but for your entire race. We do not tolerate those who lack the capacity for empathy and connection." Jason felt a chill run down his spine. "And if I succeed?" Nivara's lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. "Then humanity will gain an ally unlike any other. But do not think this will be easy. You have one chance, human. Do not waste it." Jason swallowed hard. the weight of her words sinking in. "All right, Nivera," he said, trying to steady his voice. "What do I have to do?" She raised her hand, and the golden light around her began to glow brighter. "Come with me. Your trial begins now." Before Jason could protest, the golden light engulfed him, and his surroundings dissolved into a cascade of brilliant colors. As he was whisked away to an unknown fate, one thought dominated his mind. What the hell have I gotten myself into? The test begins. When Jason opened his eyes, he was no longer on the Emberhawk. The sterile, metallic hum of his mining ship had been replaced by an overwhelming stillness. He stood on a platform suspended high above an alien world, its surface glowing with soft, shifting hues of blue, green, and violet. Towering crystalline spires stretched into the sky, their jagged forms glittering like starlight. Below, rivers of liquid light wove through lush, bioluminescent forests, illuminating the alien landscape. Jason blinked, trying to process the surreal beauty before him. A warm breeze, carrying the scent of something sweet and floral, brushed against his face. But the tranquility was short-lived. "Welcome to Zalora." Nivera's voice came from behind him. She stood at the edge of the platform, her silver gown blending seamlessly with the crystalline surface. Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, but her presence was impossible to ignore. Jason turned to face her, his confusion morphing into irritation. "You can't just pluck people out of their lives and drop them into whatever this is. I didn't sign up for a cosmic field trip." Nivera's violet eyes flicked to him, unreadable but intense. "Your protests are irrelevant, Jason Parker. You agreed to the challenge, and now it begins." Jason threw up his hands. "Agreed? I didn't have much of a choice, did I?" Ignoring his sarcasm, Nivera gestured to a shimmering archway that had appeared behind them, its surface rippling like water. "Step through the gateway. Your first trial awaits." Jason stared at the archway, unease knotting his stomach. "What exactly is this trial? You're going to have to give me more than cryptic warnings and pretty lights." Nivera's expression softened, just a fraction. "Each trial will test a fundamental aspect of what my people value most. Love. Not romantic sentimentality, but the ability to connect, to empathize, and to sacrifice. Your first test is simple. Trust." Jason scoffed. "Trust? In what? You?" "In yourself," she replied calmly. "And in others. Now go." Reluctantly, Jason stepped toward the gateway. As he passed through, the world around him shifted violently. The crystalline beauty of Zalora vanished, replaced by the chaotic roar of rushing water and jagged cliffs. Jason found himself standing on a narrow stone bridge, spanning a deep canyon. The wind howled, carrying a chilling spray from the river far below. Ahead of him, a young alien child stood frozen in the middle of the bridge. Its translucent skin shimmered faintly, and its wide, panicked eyes darted toward Jason. The child clung to the stone railing as the structure beneath their feet groaned and cracked. "Help me," the child cried, its voice high and trembling. The sound tugged at Jason's gut, but doubt clouded his thoughts. Was this real, or just part of the test? "Hang on, kid," Jason called, rushing forward. But as he moved, the bridge shifted beneath his feet. A deep fissure formed, splitting the structure in two. Jason barely managed to grab hold of the railing before the section behind him crumbled into the canyon below. Nivera's voice echoed around him, calm and detached. "Do you trust that the child's cries are genuine, or do you believe this to be a trick?" Jason gritted his teeth. "Does it matter? I'm not leaving the kid to die. Even if it means risking herself." Nivera's tone held a trace of curiosity. "This is not Earth, Jason Parker. Choices have consequences beyond what you can see." Jason ignored her, focusing instead on the child. He crawled across the unstable bridge, his heart hammering with each creak and groan. The gap in the stone was wide, but not impossible to cross, if he could reach the child first. "Hold on," he shouted again, But the child's grip was slipping. Jason lunged forward just as the bridge gave way beneath them. He caught the child in his arms, the weight nearly pulling them both into the abyss. His fingers scraped against the rough stone, finding a narrow ledge to cling to. The child clung to him, trembling. "I don't want to fall," it whimpered. "You're not going to," Jason grunted, his muscles straining as he hauled them both onto the ledge. They collapsed onto solid ground just as the last remnants of the bridge crumbled away. Jason sat up, panting. The child looked at him with wide, shimmering eyes. "Why did you help me? You didn't have to." Jason stared at the alien child, his heart still racing. "Because that's what you do when someone's in trouble. You help them. No strings attached." The child's form shimmered, and before Jason could react, it transformed into a glowing orb of light that floated into the air. Naivara's voice surrounded him again, this time with a hint of satisfaction. "You trusted your instincts, even when doubt clouded your mind. You have passed the first trial." The canyon dissolved, and Jason found himself back on the crystalline platform, Naivara standing before him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a faint glimmer of approval in her eyes. "One trial down," she said, "but the path ahead will only grow more difficult. Are you ready to continue?" Jason let out a dry laugh, still catching his breath. "Do I have a choice?" Naivara smiled faintly. "No, but perhaps you'll come to embrace it." As the next gateway appeared, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that he was walking further into something far more dangerous and far more important than he could imagine. Trials of trust. Jason barely had time to process the first trial before another shimmering archway appeared before him. The crystalline platform beneath his feet pulsed with soft light, almost as if it were alive, urging him forward. Naivara stood by his side, her serene demeanor betraying none of the weight behind her words. "The next trial is upon you," she said, her voice echoing in the still air. "It will test not only your trust, but your willingness to see beyond yourself." Jason ran a hand through his hair, still catching his breath. "You know, a little downtime between these trials wouldn't hurt." Naivara tilted her head, the faintest flicker of amusement crossing her face. "The universe does not wait for comfort, Jason Parker. Step through the gate." He sighed, muttering something under his breath, and walked into the archway. The world shifted again, and Jason found himself in a completely alien setting. He stood in the middle of what appeared to be an alien marketplace. The air was thick with vibrant colors and unfamiliar scents, as if someone had blended 1,000 different cultures into one surreal tapestry. Stalls lined the streets, displaying goods that glowed, pulsed, or floated in midair. The beings walking among them were just as strange. Creatures of all shapes, sizes, and forms, each going about their business as if Jason wasn't there. For a moment, Jason was overwhelmed. The sheer scale and diversity of the place made his head spin. Then a voice cut through the chaos. "Help! Somebody! Help!" Jason turned toward the sound. In the middle of the bustling street, a tall alien with reptilian features stood, clutching a small orb that buzzed with energy. Its eyes darted around frantically as two hulking figures in dark armor approached it. The figures radiated menace, their mechanical limbs clanking with each step. Jason's instincts kicked in. He pushed his way through the crowd toward the scene, his heart pounding. "What's going on here?" he demanded, standing between the reptilian alien and the armored figures. The reptilian alien looked at Jason, its wide eyes filled with desperation. "They're trying to take the core from me. If they do, my entire family will be ruined." Jason turned to the armored figures, who loomed over him like twin towers. "Is that true? What's this about?" One of them stepped forward, its voice a low mechanical growl. "The core belongs to us. This thief stole it. Move aside, human." The reptilian alien clung to Jason's arm. "I didn't steal it. I found it. It was abandoned. Please, you have to believe me." Jason's mind raced. He didn't know the rules of this place or who was telling the truth, but something about the desperation in the alien's voice struck a chord with him. Still, siding with the wrong party could have serious consequences. Navarra's voice echoed faintly in his mind. The trial is not about knowing the truth. It is about choosing whom to trust. Jason frowned. He hated cryptic advice, but he couldn't ignore the stakes. He turned to the reptilian alien. What happens if they take the core? It will destroy my family's future, the alien said, trembling. The core powers our life support systems. Without it, we'll lose everything. Jason turned back to the armored figures. What's your stake in this? If it's so valuable, why was it abandoned? The figures didn't answer. Instead, one of them reached for the orb, its metal claw extending with a sharp hiss. Jason acted on impulse. All right, you're going to have to go through me, he said, planting himself firmly between the alien and the armored figures. His heart pounded as he realized how foolish this was. He was unarmed, outmatched, and completely out of his depth. The larger of the two armored figures cocked its head, as if evaluating him. You would risk yourself for a stranger. Jason didn't flinch. Maybe. Or maybe I just don't like bullies. For a moment, the street was deathly silent. Then the armored figures stepped back. So be it. But remember, human, actions have consequences. With that, they turned and disappeared into the crowd. Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The reptilian alien gripped his hand tightly. Thank you. You don't know what this means to me. Before Jason could respond, the world shimmered again. The marketplace faded, and he was back on the crystalline platform with Navarra. She regarded him with a quiet intensity, her hands clasped before her. You chose to trust, she said, not because you knew the outcome, but because you believed in the value of standing up for someone in need. That is the essence of connection. Jason crossed his arms, still uneasy. Yeah, but what if I got it wrong? What if that core really did belong to those guys? Navarra smiled faintly. The truth was irrelevant. The trial was about your willingness to act, even in uncertainty. That is what my people needed to see. Jason shook his head. Your people have a strange way of testing people. The universe is strange, Jason Parker, Navarra replied. But it is also beautiful. And so are the choices you've made. As another gateway appeared before them, Jason realized he was starting to understand Navarra's words. Trust wasn't just about believing others. It was about believing in the importance of doing the right thing, even when the stakes were unclear. But as he stepped toward the next trial, he couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest challenges were still to come. The alien's secret. Jason didn't step through the next gateway immediately. He lingered on the crystalline platform, staring at the swirling archway ahead of him. Each trial so far had been like peeling back the layers of an onion, confusing, frustrating, and leaving him with more questions than answers. Navarra stood a short distance away, her gaze fixed on the horizon of her surreal, glowing world. You've been awfully quiet, Jason said, his voice carrying a faint edge of sarcasm. No cryptic advice for me this time. Navarra turned to him, her violet eyes shimmering with a strange intensity. You're learning. You no longer ask questions that cannot be answered. Jason snorted. You mean questions like, why me? Or, what's the point of all this? She stepped closer, her silvery gown flowing as if caught in a non-existent breeze. Exactly. Those questions are irrelevant. The choices you make, those are what matter. Jason tilted his head, studying her. And what about you? You've been putting me through these tests, judging me, but I still don't know what you really want. You say this is about love, connection, trust, but why do you care? What's your stake in all of this? For the first time, Navarra hesitated. It was subtle, a flicker of something in her expression, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. She turned away, clasping her hands in front of her. My people once believed as you do, she said softly. That connection is universal. That love is a bridge between all species. But we were wrong. Jason frowned, stepping closer. What do you mean? She didn't look at him as she spoke. Centuries ago, the Zelleran Collective reached out to other civilizations, offering knowledge, resources, and peace. We believed we could unite the galaxy through mutual understanding. But instead, we were betrayed. Worlds we trusted turned their weapons on us. Alliances crumbled. Wars erupted. Her voice grew colder, harder. We survived, but we learned a harsh truth. Trust is a weakness. Love is a liability. And connection is a dangerous gamble. Jason shook his head. So you're telling me all of this is just a way to confirm your cynicism? That you're hoping I'll fail so you can pat yourselves on the back and say, "See, we were right all along." Nevera finally turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "No, if that were true, you would not be here. I would not be here." Jason stared at her, trying to decipher her meaning. "Then why am I here? Why are you putting me through this?" Nevera's gaze softened, and for a moment, she looked almost vulnerable. "Because I want to believe I'm wrong." The admission hit Jason like a punch to the gut. He had expected more cold logic, more cryptic detachment. But this was raw, real. He didn't know how to respond. Nevera continued, her voice quiet. "This trial is not just for you, Jason Parker. It is for me. To see if humanity, if you can prove that connection is still worth fighting for." Jason let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. That's a lot of pressure to put on one guy. Her lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "And yet, here you stand." Before Jason could reply, the gateway flared brighter, pulling his attention. Nevera gestured toward it. "Your next trial awaits. The answers you seek may lie beyond." Jason stepped through the archway, bracing himself for whatever lay ahead. The transition was less jarring this time, though the scene that greeted him was no less surreal. He stood on a sprawling battlefield. The ground was scorched and cracked, and the air was thick with ash and smoke. Alien machines lay in ruin, their twisted forms half buried in the rubble. In the distance, Jason could see figures moving, injured soldiers, struggling civilians, and towering war machines still locked in combat. At the center of the chaos stood a massive generator, its core pulsating with unstable energy. Sparks and arcs of electricity shot out from it, tearing through the air with deafening cracks. Jason didn't need anyone to tell him. The generator was going to explode. Before he could process what to do, a voice called out, "Help us, please." Jason turned to see a group of aliens huddled near the base of the generator. Their faces were streaked with soot and fear, and one of them, a young woman with iridescent skin, held a small child in her arms. They were trapped, the debris around them too heavy to move. Nevera's voice echoed in his mind. "This trial is simple. Save them, or save yourself. The explosion will consume this entire area in minutes. Your choice will define your humanity." Jason's stomach tightened. Define my humanity. That's a little dramatic, don't you think? But he already knew what he had to do. He sprinted toward the trapped group, his heart pounding. The heat from the unstable generator was unbearable, but Jason forced himself to focus. "Can you move?" he shouted as he reached them. The woman shook her head, her voice trembling. "The debris is too heavy. We've tried, but..." Jason didn't let her finish. He crouched down and began pulling at the rubble, ignoring the searing pain in his hands. The clock was ticking, and the generator was growing louder with each passing second. Finally, he managed to free the woman and child. The others followed, their expressions a mix of relief and disbelief. "Go," Jason shouted, pushing them toward the edge of the battlefield. "Get as far away as you can." "What about you?" the woman asked, her voice breaking. Jason glanced back at the generator, its core now blindingly bright. "I'll catch up. Just go." He turned and ran toward the generator. If he could stabilize it, even for a few seconds, he might buy enough time for everyone to escape. The world around him blurred as the generator erupted in a blinding flash. Jason felt himself being pulled backward, the scene dissolving into darkness. When he opened his eyes, he was back on the crystalline platform. Nivera stood before him, her expression unreadable. "You risked everything for them. Why?" Jason shrugged, his voice hoarse. "Because they needed help. It's as simple as that." Nivera studied him for a long moment before speaking. "Perhaps connection is not as lost as we believed." Jason frowned, trying to read her. "Is that your way of saying I passed?" She didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the next gateway. "The final trials will reveal the truth." As Jason followed her, he couldn't shake the feeling that the stakes were higher than he'd ever imagined. Not just for him, but for her as well. A test of sacrifice. Jason didn't need to be told that the stakes were rising. The air itself seemed heavier as he stepped through the next gateway, its shimmering surface rippling like water. This time, the transition wasn't smooth. The world around him twisted violently, and for a moment, he felt as though he was being torn apart. When the sensation ended, Jason found himself standing in the middle of an alien wasteland. The ground was cracked and barren, with jagged spires of black stone jutting into a sky choked with swirling ash. A faint, pulsing glow came from fissures in the ground, casting an eerie light that made the landscape look even more desolate. In the distance, Jason could see a large, dome-like structure, its surface shimmering faintly with the same crystalline glow as Nivera's world. "Where am I now?" Jason muttered, his voice echoing strangely in the still air. Nivera appeared beside him, her form materializing as if she had always been there. Her usual calm demeanor was tinged with something new, an undercurrent of tension that Jason hadn't seen before. "This is the proving ground," she said, her voice quieter than usual. "The final test begins here." Jason frowned, his instincts telling him this trial would be different. What's the catch this time? More cryptic lessons about trust or connection. Nivera's violet eyes met his, and for the first time, Jason saw uncertainty in her gaze. "This test will ask for more than words or simple choices, Jason Parker. It will demand everything you are willing to give." Before Jason could press her for details, the ground beneath them rumbled violently. He staggered, struggling to keep his balance as cracks snaked across the barren landscape. From the fissures emerged massive hulking forms, machines made of dark, twisted metal, their glowing cores pulsing like hearts. They moved with terrifying precision, their footsteps shaking the ground as they advanced toward the dome. "What are those?" Jason shouted, his heart pounding. Nivera's gaze was fixed on the machines. "They are remnants of our past, a shadow of the wars that nearly destroyed us. They are drawn to the dome, and if they reach it, all within will perish." Jason's mind raced. "And let me guess, there are people inside." Nivera nodded. "My people. Hundreds of them." Jason's fists clenched. "Okay, so we stop them. What's the plan?" Nivera turned to him, her expression solemn. "The defenses of the dome are failing. There is only one way to stop the machines, the generator within their leader. If it is destroyed, the others will cease to function." Jason stared at her, his stomach dropping. "And how am I supposed to do that? Those things are massive. I don't exactly have a tank lying around." Nivera's voice softened. "There is a way, but it comes at great risk. The generator is protected by a shield that cannot be breached from the outside. Someone must enter the machine, overload the generator manually, and detonate it from within." Jason's breath caught. "And that someone is me, isn't it?" Nivera didn't answer, but the look in her eyes told him everything he needed to know. He ran a hand through his hair, trying to steady his nerves. "Let me get this straight. You want me to climb into a giant death machine, sabotage it from the inside, and blow myself up in the process. That's your brilliant plan." "It is the only way," Nivera said, her voice firm. "The choice is yours, Jason Parker. But know this, if the machines reach the dome, they will destroy everything. My people will not survive. Jason laughed bitterly. You keep saying it's my choice. But is it really? If I walk away, I'm the guy who let an entire civilization die. Some choice. Nevera stepped closer, her gaze piercing. True sacrifice is never easy. That is why it is the ultimate test of love and connection. The willingness to give everything for the sake of others. That is what defines us. Jason looked at her, searching for any hint of deception, but all he saw was raw sincerity. He sighed, his shoulders slumping. Fine. I'll do it. But if I make it out of this alive, you owe me an explanation. A real one. A faint smile tugged at Nevera's lips. If you survive, I will tell you everything. The journey to the leader machine was harrowing. The air was filled with the deafening roar of metal grinding against metal, and the ground shook with every step the machines took. Jason moved quickly, using the shadows to avoid detection. Nevera guided him from a distance, her voice in his earpiece providing calm, precise instructions. Finally, he reached the massive leader machine. It towered above him, its core glowing a deep, menacing red. A hatch on its side hissed open, revealing a narrow passage leading into its interior. Jason hesitated, staring into the dark opening. This is a terrible idea. You can still turn back, Nevera said softly. No one would blame you. Jason shook his head. Maybe not, but I would blame myself. With that, he climbed into the machine. The interior was a labyrinth of shifting gears and glowing conduits, the air thick with heat and the acrid stench of burning metal. Jason made his way to the core, following the path Nevera had mapped out for him. When he reached the generator, he paused. It was massive, its surface pulsating with unstable energy. Jason knew what he had to do, but the reality of it hit him hard. All right, he muttered, his voice shaking. Let's get this over with. He began overloading the generator, his hands moving quickly over the controls. Alarms blared, and the machine shook violently as the core destabilized. Jason, Nevera's voice came through his earpiece. You must leave now. The detonation will occur in less than a minute. Jason laughed weakly. And here I thought I'd have time for a victory lap. He turned to leave, but the passage he had entered through was now blocked by a wall of molten metal. There was no way out. Nevera, he said quietly, I'm not making it out of here, am I? There was a pause, then her voice came, filled with something he hadn't expected. Sorrow. You knew the risks. Jason closed his eyes, a strange sense of peace washing over him. Well, if this is it, tell your people they owe me one. The generator's core erupted in a blinding flash, and Jason felt himself consumed by light. As everything went dark, his last thought was of Nevera's face, and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, his sacrifice had meant something. The judgment. Jason's eyes fluttered open, and he was immediately struck by the odd sensation of weightlessness. He expected pain, or at the very least, the crushing silence of death, but instead, he was enveloped in a serene, golden light. He floated in a void where time and space seemed meaningless. Am I dead? He muttered, his voice strangely clear despite the lack of air around him. A familiar voice answered, Not yet. Jason turned to see Nevera standing a few feet away, or at least what passed for feet in this strange place. She looked different here. Her usual calm and unflappable demeanor was replaced by an expression that bordered on reverence. Her glowing form seemed almost human. You brought me back, Jason asked, his voice a mix of relief and suspicion. Nevera nodded. Your body was destroyed, but your essence, your consciousness, was preserved. You are in a transitory state. Jason frowned. A transitory state. Is that your fancy way of saying I'm in limbo? She gave a faint smile, but it quickly faded. You are here because the trial is not yet complete. The actions you took in the machine were unexpected. Jason raised an eyebrow. Unexpected. I thought blowing myself up to save your people was exactly the kind of thing you were testing me for. It was, she admitted, her voice soft. But the magnitude of your choice, it has caused a stir among my people. The elders must now decide whether your sacrifice is enough to prove humanity's worth. Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. Great, so now I get to be judged by a bunch of aliens I've never met. Fantastic. Nivera's expression turned serious. The elders do not make such judgments lightly. They will probe your memories, your emotions, your very essence. They will see everything. Jason's heart sank. Everything. Yes, Nivera said, her gaze piercing. Your hopes, your fears, your regrets. They will all be laid bare. Jason crossed his arms, trying to mask his unease. And what about you? Are you going to stand there while they pick me apart, or are you on my side in this? Her expression softened. I am with you, Jason Parker. But the elder's judgment is final. I cannot interfere. Before Jason could respond, the golden void around him shifted. The light dissolved, replaced by a massive chamber that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. The walls were made of a shimmering material that reflected not just light but emotions. Jason could feel the echoes of joy, anger, and sorrow radiating from every surface. In the center of the chamber stood a circular platform, and around it floated 10 figures cloaked in shimmering, translucent robes. Their faces were indistinct, their forms constantly shifting as if they were made of liquid light. These were the elders. Jason stepped onto the platform, his pulse quickening as the elders turned their attention to him. Though they didn't speak aloud, their voices filled his mind, a chorus of calm yet authoritative tones. Jason Parker, they intoned in unison. You have faced the trials and made the ultimate sacrifice. Now we must determine whether your actions were driven by true connection or by lesser motives. Jason bristled. Lesser motives. I risked my life to save your people. How much more proof do you need? One elder's voice resonated louder than the others, carrying a tone of doubt. Humans have been known to act heroically out of pride, arrogance, or even the desire for recognition. We must see what lies at the core of your actions. Before Jason could protest, the platform beneath him began to glow. Memories flashed before his eyes. His childhood, his struggles, his failures. The time he cheated on a test in school. The time he ignored a friend in need because he was too focused on his own problems. Every flaw, every mistake, laid bare for the elders to see. Jason clenched his fists, feeling exposed and vulnerable. So that's it. You're just going to judge me based on the worst moments of my life. Another elder's voice, softer and more understanding, responded. We see everything, Jason Parker. Not just your flaws, but your growth. Your capacity to change. Your ability to rise above your imperfections. The memory shifted, showing the times Jason had helped others. The time he spent hours fixing a neighbor's broken generator during a blackout. The time he comforted a grieving coworker. And finally, the moment he chose to sacrifice himself to save Nivera's people. The chamber fell silent, and Jason could feel the weight of the elders' deliberation. After what felt like an eternity, the chorus of voices spoke again. Your actions were not without flaw, but they were driven by genuine compassion and selflessness. You have demonstrated the capacity for connection, a capacity we had long believed humanity lacked. Jason let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him. So, that's it. I passed. The elders' forms shifted, their collective presence becoming more focused. Humanity has earned a chance, but the road ahead will not be easy. Connection must be nurtured, not assumed. Trust must be built over time. Jason nodded, his voice steady. I get it. Nothing worth having comes easy. The elders turned to Nivera, who had remained silent throughout the judgment. Nivera, you brought this human before us, and you have witnessed his trials. Do you stand by him? Nivera stepped forward, her gaze steady. I do. He has proven that humanity's potential for connection is real. He has also shown me that hope is not a weakness. The elders' forms shimmered, and their voices softened. Then the decision is made. Humanity will be given a chance to join the greater galactic community, but their path will depend on their choices and the guidance of those who believe in them. Jason found himself back on the crystalline platform, the chamber and the elders gone. Nivera stood beside him, her expression unreadable. "Well," Jason said, his voice tinged with exhaustion. "That was intense." Nivera turned to him, her eyes filled with something he hadn't seen before, genuine warmth. "You have given my people a gift we thought we had lost forever. Hope." Jason managed a faint smile. "Glad I could help. So, what happens now?" Nivera's lips curved into a small smile. "Now we begin again." As another gateway appeared before them, Jason realized that his journey was far from over. But for the first time, he felt ready to face whatever came next. Redemption and love. Jason stood on the crystalline platform, the golden light around him fading into a soft glow. For the first time since this journey began, the silence wasn't oppressive. It felt like a quiet moment of peace before the next storm. Nivera stood beside him, her violet eyes fixed on the swirling horizon. "You did it," Jason said, his voice laced with a mix of relief and exhaustion. "You convinced your people to give us a shot." Nivera turned to him, her expression calm but softened by something he couldn't quite place. "It was not I who convinced them, Jason Parker. It was you." Jason chuckled dryly, running a hand through his hair. "I don't feel like much of a hero. I feel like a guy who just stumbled his way through a bunch of trials and got lucky." Nivera stepped closer, her voice lowering. "Luck had nothing to do with it. Your choices, the ones you made when no one was watching, revealed your true character. That is what convinced the elders." Jason shifted awkwardly, unused to such high praise. "So, what happens now? Do I get to go back to Earth and tell everyone about the time I saved an entire alien civilization?" Nivera's lips curved into a faint smile. "If you choose to return, you may. But there is another option." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Another option? What are you talking about?" Nivera gestured toward a new gateway that had appeared, its surface shimmering with a soft, inviting light. "My people have agreed to open themselves to humanity, but the bridge between our worlds will not build itself. It will require patience, understanding, and courage. I cannot do it alone." Jason blinked, the weight of her words sinking in. "You want me to stay?" She nodded. "Your presence here would be a symbol, a reminder of what humanity is capable of. But more than that, I believe you and I can learn from one another." Jason stared at her, his mind racing. He thought about his life back on Earth, the long hours mining, the isolation, the sense that he was just another cog in the machine. And then he thought about everything he had seen and done here. The trials, the sacrifices, the moments of connection. What would staying mean? He asked quietly. Nivera stepped closer, her gaze holding his. It would mean becoming a part of something greater, helping to mend the fractures between our species, and perhaps exploring the connection we have begun to build. Jason felt his pulse quicken. There was something in her voice, an openness, a vulnerability, that caught him off guard. He realized then that this wasn't just about politics or diplomacy. Nivera was offering him something personal, something real. He looked at the gateway, then back at her. What if I'm not good enough? What if I mess it all up? Nivera reached out, her hand hovering just above his. You have already proven that you are good enough. The only question now is whether you are willing to try. Jason took a deep breath, the weight of the decision settling on his shoulders. He thought about everything he'd learned, the value of trust, the power of connection, the meaning of sacrifice. And then he smiled, a small but genuine smile. All right, he said. Let's build that bridge. The gateway opened, and Jason and Nivera stepped through together. On the other side was a new beginning, a vibrant, thriving city filled with Nivera's people. The air buzzed with a sense of renewal, of hope reborn. Jason felt like a stranger, but for the first time, he didn't feel out of place. As they walked side by side, Nivera glanced at him, her voice quiet but warm. "This will not be easy." Jason grinned. "Nothing worth doing ever is." She smiled back, and for the first time, Jason saw something beyond her calm exterior. There was warmth, curiosity, and perhaps even the beginnings of something more. In the years that followed, Jason became a bridge between two worlds. He worked tirelessly to foster understanding between humanity and the Zelleran collective, often stumbling but never giving up. Nivera was always by his side, guiding him, challenging him, and eventually, trusting him with her heart. Their bond grew into something neither of them had expected, an unshakable partnership that transcended their differences. Together, they showed their people that connection wasn't a weakness. It was the greatest strength of all. And as Jason looked out at the stars one night, standing on a balcony beside Nivera, he realized that this strange, improbable journey had given him something he never thought he'd find. A place where he truly belonged.